Well, another article is out, and this one should have you really, really mad. It's titled, Kyle Rittenhouse is on trial in Wisconsin, but so is vigilantism. We're going to read it and react. Hello out there. I am trying to get through.
With his powerful brainwaves cradled in the warmth of reasoning, it's time for Johnnie Walker Dread to straighten you out on a thing or two. Emanating all the way from exciting Las Vegas, Oklahoma, it's the Johnnie Walker Dread Show.
And this is by Cynthia Miller. Is it Idris or Idris or Idris? An MSNBC opinion columnist. And let's see how much she knows about what's going on here. And it starts, a jury in Kenosha, Wisconsin has begun hearing evidence that will help them decide whether Kyle Rittenhouse is guilty of reckless or intentional homicide in the shooting of 3 people during August 2020 racial injustice protests, or if he acted in self-defense. Of course, she's going to call this racial injustice protest, because that really does describe Joseph Rosenbaum. Yeah, okay. What's really on trial, though, is citizen vigilantism. At a moment when Americans' willingness to use political violence has already skyrocketed, this trial's outcome risks legitimizing individual violent action and galvanizing civilians who are unhappy with the direction of the country to take matters into their own hands. So in other words, what she's trying to paint is all of this violence is just people mad about Biden winning and how laws are being enacted. And they're taking to the streets and they're shooting people and stuff. And she's painted Kyle Rittenhouse in that corner. Yeah, okay. This is especially true for the political right. Yeah, because during the Kenosha riots where they were burning cars and, well, basically setting everything on fire, that was the political right doing that, right? Okay. And this political right has embraced Rittenhouse as a patriotic martyr. And I've been saying not to do that, okay? I don't really think that's a good idea, but it is what it is. During the past 5 years, we have seen a significant rise in political violence in the U.S. Get this, driven in large part by support for violence and violent action itself from the right. So here is another article saying that all of these protests in Portland and Seattle and Minneapolis and Washington, D.C. and in Kenosha, well, those are all right-wingers. You know, the left has been peaceful, powering in their homes while the right takes to the street and burns and loots and vandalizes. Nearly 4 in 10 Republicans, compared to an already troubling 3 in 10 Americans overall, say the use of political force is justified if elected leaders won't protect America. And again, these things come from the actual questions that you ask. These findings are consistent with other data showing that a majority of Republicans now believe that force may be necessary to save the traditional American way of life. These attitudes are mirrored in actual political violence. The FBI has reported that domestic terrorism investigations have more than doubled since spring of 2020, with the greatest threat coming from white supremacists and unlawful militia groups. So we're right back to it again. All this looting and vandalizing and pillaging, well, those are all right-wingers. The left is just sitting there waiting for the violence to tone down so they can go outside. They're scared. Much of this violence comes from individuals who self-radicalize online, assemble rather spontaneously into loosely organized groups, or mobilize into violence based on concepts including the Boogaloo, code for a second civil war, or 3%ers, which refers to the false claim that it took only 3% of the American colonists to successfully rise up against the British. I don't really have any interest in that stuff. The outcomes of such mobilization are serious. Over the past few years, we've seen repeated incidents of lethal street violence, armed protests at state capitals, and attacks on law enforcement and elected officials. I'm wondering how much of that was done by the right and the left. To see lethal street violence, I think the left has been involved in a lot of that. Armed protests at state capitals. Okay, that's the right wing. I only know of 2 incidences. And attacks on law enforcement and elected officials. I think the left has been doing a lot of that. We've also seen violent plots organized by paramilitary groups like Antifa. You really think that that might count? And unlawful militias, including the Oath Keepers, street gang movements such as the Proud Boys, and heavily armed, self-radicalized lone actors. Self-radicalized lone actors. Could she be talking about Antifa? Armed Patriot volunteers assembled at the southern U.S. border in 2018 to support the Border Patrol, live streaming their activities over social media as they threatened migrants. This is the backdrop to Rittenhouse's trip to Wisconsin. A trip to Wisconsin. It's like he got up at crack of dawn because he's got a long road ahead of him, right? And so he gets out and he fills up the family station wagon or the SUV with all of the things he's going to need for this trip. And he gets in the car and he drives off into the sunset. In August 2020, a Kenosha-based paramilitary group issued online calls for help to protect local businesses from those protesting racial injustice in the wake of a police shooting that left a black man paralyzed from the waist down. Notice something. She doesn't tell you what they were doing. The massive amounts of fires, looting, pillaging that went on, they burned half that city down. She doesn't mention any of it. All she says here is that these people were called in to help protect local businesses from those protesting racial injustice. Why would you need to do that if all they're going to be doing is protesting? But if you saw Matt Orfalia's video that I just posted on my YouTube channel, actually it was just part of a list of videos that I suggested you go watch. But you see that and you will see that what she is doing here is a massive whitewashing of what really happened. Rittenhouse, then 17, traveled from Illinois armed with an AR-15 style rifle. Ooh, the AR-15, so scary. During the course of the evening, he shot 3 people, killing 2 of them. Oh, let's just not mention anything else, right? The fact is that Joseph Rosenbaum, the person who attacked him, was not a protester. He's a rioter. There's no doubt about it. He's a lunatic. He's an ex-felon. He is violent, and he was not there to protest. Furthermore, he ambushed Kyle Rittenhouse. Kyle was just walking down the street when Rosenbaum crept out from behind a car and began chasing him. And furthermore, the other 2 were chasing him as well. They were trying to kill him. So this whole idea that he just showed up and just started killing people, which is sort of what she implies here, is a pure fantasy. Rittenhouse became a cause celeb for the right, who rallied around him as a patriotic defender of liberty and a peacekeeper who had been unjustly charged. His image became a meme and a t-shirt icon used to taunt racial injustice protesters. And I won't read the slogan. A legal machinery leapt to his defense through the Fight Back Foundation, which evolved into a bigger project to support law-abiding citizens who want to protect their communities and take the country back. Fundraising sites and hashtags urge supporters to free Kyle, along with donations and purchases of merchandise and apparel sold by his family that ultimately raised the $2 million in bail that was posted for his release from jail. And yeah, I gave some of my money to that because you know why? I think he's innocent. You see, guilt and innocence has no business in her editorial here. She doesn't care. She looks upon Kyle Rittenhouse as a person that needs to be persecuted, needs to be prosecuted and convicted. He needs to be convicted because we can't let American vigilantism gain the upper hand. And if he is innocent and goes to the rest of his life to jail, no, that's just too bad for her. She doesn't care. If you told her that, you know what, we found out that Kyle Rittenhouse was actually innocent after all, she'd probably respond with, oh, that's terrible. Like the way that when your neighbor tells you that their cat died, right? That's how she's going to respond. Oh, damn, you know. This is the reason why I say this is a political prosecution, and she is admitting it. She's telling you that this trial is all about right versus left and the need to suppress American vigilantism from the right. And if Kyle is an unwitting pawn in it, that's too bad. Celebrating citizen vigilantism is dangerous. You know what's more dangerous? Allowing people free reign to just burn your cities down. That's more dangerous. Allowing police officers and fire departments to just simply be cowered into submission while the mob burns everything you own up in smoke. That's more dangerous than citizen vigilantism. You saw the fires in Kenosha. They would have burned the entire city down if they had had the ability. They tried the next day. What stopped them? Well, to a large extent, the Patriots did, if you want to call them that. They showed up with guns and stopped the violence. It wasn't the police. The police just herded the rioters around. It's considerably harder to communicate that to the public when legal authorities fail to condemn or prosecute unlawful militia engagement. Well, that's obviously not happening here in the Kyle Rittenhouse case. He's not even a militia member, and they're prosecuting him. I mean, what's their beef there? Worse, in some cases, law enforcement actively support or participate in paramilitary or militias themselves. During the Kenosha protests, local law enforcement officers legitimized vigilantes and unlawful militia presence by thanking them for being there. That's right, because they were protecting property, they were preventing violence from occurring. You thank people who do those things for you if you're a police officer. They didn't thank the protesters or to say the rioters because the rioters were throwing stuff at them. There's a difference. One well-circulated video showed a police officer in an armored vehicle tossing a water bottle to armed militia members saying, "We appreciate you guys." Would they get off the water? The water was thrown to them because these guys had tear gas in their eyes. So they threw them the water so they could flush the tear gas out. They didn't serve them pina coladas. The good news is that there is tremendous concern about rising vigilante violence, both from policymakers and from experts who are working to educate the public about laws that prohibit such violence. In Wisconsin, for example, state law prohibits paramilitary organizations, of which Kyle is not a member, and forbids civilians from acting like a public officer or from assuming peacekeeping or law enforcement functions. I think that's true in every state. Individuals can defend their own property and selves from harm, but they cannot join forces with others in an organized, unlicensed way and usurp the official role of law enforcement. Yeah, well, they have to if law enforcement is not doing the job. Come hell or high water, you can't let your city burn to the ground. You just can't. What are you going to do? This writer here has all the answers, I suppose. What's her answer? You saw what they did to Kenosha. Do you really support the setting up a climate and environment where people have free reign to just go in and destroy anything they want? And in her mind, yes, that's better than having these vigilantes, because these vigilantes, they might get into confrontations and hurt somebody. So it's much better to just let the city burn to the ground, because private property doesn't mean anything to them unless it's their own house. If it's their own house, all of a sudden, everything changes. Okay? They typically live in gated communities. The police are a phone call away. They don't live in Kenosha. But when you live in city center and you see hordes of people burning down business and houses around you, your attitude changes really quickly. Earlier this year, in the wake of the killing of black jogger Ahmaud Arbery, oh, come on, he's not a jogger, okay? Can you guys just give up on that? I'm not saying necessarily that his killing was justified. I don't know. I haven't examined that case very deeply. But quit calling him a jogger. The state of Georgia repealed its citizens arrest law after Brian Kemp referred to it as antiquated and ripe for abuse in ways that enabled sinister, evil motives. 3 white men are on trial for murder in Arbery's killing. Yeah, you know what happened there in Georgia? They did get rid of the citizens arrest law, and now you can't citizens arrest. If somebody breaks into your house, you might be in serious trouble if you try to defend yourself. You can't hold the person in custody. Georgia has the worst laws in the country for people who are trying to protect themselves. Now, by the way, this is a new law that came in after the killing of Arbery. So the people on trial are not held to it. But right now, if you live in Georgia, you may want to think about getting the hell out of that state. Because if somebody breaks into your home and you pull a gun on them, you could be facing some serious time. In Georgia, probably the best thing to do is just let them steal whatever they want and let them leave. It's unfortunate. Now, by the way, if you do live in Georgia, talk to a lawyer first. Don't take my word for it. I've read a bunch up on this change in the law, but I'm not an expert in it. Vigilantism and political violence are serious threats to the stability of our democracy and the safety of our citizens. Roving mobs of arsonists and looters are not, according to her. They are not a problem. Let that soak in. Encouraging a heavily armed populace to take matters into their own hands is a recipe for disaster, as opposed to allowing armed mobs to take the law into their own hands and essentially burn everything in sight. That's preferable if they come from the left. If they come from the right, oh, that's no good. That kind of behavior has to be stopped. That's vigilantism. But if it comes from the left, now those are protesters, and they're just out there exercising their First Amendment rights. It is critical that we all draw a clear line around the illegality of vigilante violence and unlawful militia activity, and actively challenge those who falsely frame vigilantism as patriotic defense. I don't frame it as patriotic defense. I frame it as a necessity in times when the law has simply let you down. The law is not required to protect you. The Supreme Court has already ruled on that. They can simply refuse to help. You call them up and people are attacking your home with gasoline and lighters. They don't have to come. They can just simply say, sorry. And in Kenosha, that's what they did. The police did not show up. And they basically allowed the protesters to do whatever they want. They set up a police barricade, so they kept the protesters from going into certain parts of the city. But for the most part, on the other side of that barricade, the protesters were allowed to tear the hell out of things with impunity. Yeah, they'll arrest the perpetrators later. Maybe. That is in their job description, but stopping it from happening is not. That's not their role. And so if they're not going to do it, I would have to ask this author here, who is? And keep in mind, she talks about protecting your own property. She doesn't even believe in that. Not with one of those scary guns. So let me know what you think. Like my videos, subscribe to my channel.